When preparing to record MIDI, it's a good idea to have a routine. In this video, we'll go step by step through the process so that you'll be ready to create music. First, it's always a good idea to make sure that you're receiving MIDI signal from your MIDI keyboard. And we can check that by looking up here at the MIDI in indicator. Now, when I play a key on my keyboard, I should see that little box flash, and it's not doing that. So I'm going to go into Preferences, which is Command, comma on a Mac, or Control, comma on a PC. And I'm going to check the state of my devices here. So I've got two devices that I'm using, and one is the EMU keyboard, and I've also got the Akai APC40 hooked up here. And they're both recognized. So I'm going to come down here into the MIDI ports area and make sure that everything is turned on like it needs to be. And immediately I see that my EMU keyboard input under the track column is turned off. And that's where you actually turn on the input for that particular device. I'm also noticing while I'm in here that the APC40 remote button is off. Now that should be enabled for any external device where you're sending MIDI back to the device. So I'll go ahead and click Escape to shut this dialog box. And since this is my first track I'm going to record in this session, I'm going to go up and set a tempo. I'll click in the tempo field here. And if you need to type a tempo that actually has something past the decimal, all we need to do is type the numbers, then a decimal, and the additional numbers. Next, I'm probably going to want to be able to hear that tempo, so I'm going to enable the metronome. And I'm going to want to count in for my first track I'm going to record here, so I'm going to right-click on the metronome button and choose one of the available count-ins. Let's go with 1 bar for now. If I need more or less, I'll come back later and change that. So next, I'm going to need to load a MIDI device onto my track. So I'm going to go to Live's Device Browser and navigate down here to Impulse, the drum machine, and then into the electronic folder. And I'm going to load Beatbugs. So I'll just drag and drop that on the track. And now I should be able to play a key on my keyboard and be able to hear a sound from that drum machine. Okay, so I've got the kick happening there. Now note that the samples in the Impulse device are mapped starting at C3, which is middle C. Now if you're playing below that, you're probably not going to hear anything. And if you're playing in octaves that are way above that, you probably also won't be triggering anything. But that's pretty good. I've got that happening. Now, I'm also going to want to just briefly take a look here at my MIDI inputs. So I've got two choosers here. One is for the actual devices, and the other one is for the specific MIDI channel. Most of the time when you're using a virtual instrument, one of Live's devices, you'll leave these set at all ends and all channels. But let's just take a brief look here. So it does list my APC40 and also my computer keyboard and the EMU keyboard that I have hooked up here and another interface that's on my system. I don't really care which device that Live is receiving input from because I'm only playing one at a time. But if you are actually recording to multiple MIDI tracks at the same time using different devices, you're going to want to set the specific device that this track should be looking at. In this case, I'm going to leave it at all ends. This other MIDI chooser is for the specific MIDI channel, and as I said, since I'm only using one device, I really don't care what channel I'm receiving on, just as long as I'm receiving the MIDI signal. In other cases, you might want to set a specific MIDI channel. When you create a MIDI track and you add a device to it, it automatically record enables itself, and that allows us to hear the instrument. After you've recorded a MIDI clip, you may end up disabling the record button. And when you go to play that track and maybe practice a little bit more in preparation to recording another clip, you press a key and you don't actually hear the sound. So you can do two things at that point. You can either re-enable the record button, or you can put the track in input monitoring by clicking this in button. Now I can hear myself again. But when you get ready to record, you're going to want to put the track back in auto monitoring and record enable the track, and now you'll be ready to start recording again. And last, in the future, there may be a time when you're going to want to use an external device, like a synthesizer or sampler or drum machine, with Live. To do that, you're going to need to create a track with an external instrument device on it. So let me grab that from the Live Devices browser, and I'm going to drag and drop that over here in the Drop Files area and create another track. Again, you'll want to address the MIDI inputs, the keyboard and the channel that you're on, if necessary. And then to send that MIDI signal to the outside world, we'll need to go down here to Device View and click on the MIDI 2 chooser and set that to a device. In this case, I'll actually choose my EMU keyboard. It's not actually a sound source, but it does allow us to address this other field as well. So here's my device chooser, and then again I have a channel chooser. So if I've got a drum machine that is set to play on channel 1, or I've got a bass sound on channel 2, or a keyboard sound on channel 3, I'll choose the appropriate MIDI channel to send to. So let's choose 1 here. Now remember that MIDI data is not audio, and I'm going to want to capture the audio output from that device. So I'll have to plug a cable from the device to the input of my interface, and once I've done that, I can choose that input from my audio from chooser here. So if I click on that, I'll see that I have 1 and 2 as a stereo input, and if I have 2 signals coming from that sound module, that's a good choice. If it's only mono though, I'll want to choose 1 or 2. Now that we've gone through the process of getting ready to record MIDI, you're ready to troubleshoot the most common MIDI problems and ready to make some music.